Good morning and a hearty welcome from the ManageEngine family for everyone that has joined us on this special session on understanding and implementing Essential Eight. This webinar will give an overview on Essential Eight with dedicated focus on endpoint and application management. I'll be taking this webinar locally, so while I pray that there are no network or sound issues, kindly bear with us in case such an inconvenience occurs. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Achudan and I'm a senior product marketer that working on endpoint management and security for the past 5 years with ManageEngine. For those of you who are unfamiliar with ManageEngine, ManageEngine is the IT management arm of Zoho Corporation that is also the parent company for Zoho.com, which provides business productivity applications on cloud as well as web NMS that deals with IoT and network management solutions. We have got offices all across the face of the globe, including offices in Australia. We have been in this business of IT management for nearly 20 years, and we have got 90 plus apps and free tools. So in case there's even a very small IT management need in enterprise, we have got just the right solution for you. We cover the length and breadth of IT when it comes to management. And not only do we cover the length and breadth of IT, we also cover the length and breadth of the globe because we have got more than 180,000 organizations using our applications for their management needs in 190 plus countries. And we are 3,500 employees strong and we are growing. When I said we cover the length and breadth of IT, I literally meant it, as you can see from the suite of applications. From help desk to password management to firewall, we have got just about the right solution for even the tiniest IT need in any kind of enterprise. We are available on premises in case you want your data to stay within the enterprise, or we are available on cloud as well. For those of you who are worried as to whether their data will stay within Australian data centers, we have got Australian data center just for that, which means that your data will stay within Australia. In case you're already using AWS or Azure, we are available on that as well. Similarly, we are also available as a standalone solution as well as MSPs. Huge and renowned enterprises across the face of the globe trust ManageEngine with their IT management. As you can see, we have got a lot of famous customers that are trusting ManageEngine with their IT. Lastly, we are trusted by both enterprises as well as analysts alike, as right from Gartner to EMA to Forrester, all of them frequently recognize ManageEngine solutions across multiple categories. So with that introduction out of the way, let me jump into the agenda. So we're going to start out with the need for Essential Eight. While this might seem like a question with an obvious answer, I'm going to shed light on certain misconceptions with respect to Essential Eight and in turn on cybersecurity, as well as share a couple of insights on why, despite the current pandemic and the issues that an enterprise might be facing, this is just the right time to go ahead with Essential Eight. Next up, we are going to quickly look at the history of Essential Eight and how it's reached its current state. This will have a relevance and I'll explain that later during the session. Similarly, I'll also be breaking down Essential Eight to human understandable form and into feasible configurations for IT admin that already seem to be having a lot on their plate during this pandemic time. And then we are going to deal with essentials in Essential Eight. Now, you might be wondering as to what exactly this is. We all know that enterprises have not been mandated to implement Essential Eight, and it's just a recommendation right now. With 8 controls across 3 levels, trying to implement Essential Eight fully at one go might not be a very practical solution. So I'm going to suggest that the controls that the organizations might want to implement first. These controls from the E8 that I recommend will help you protect your enterprises majorly against most of the common cyber attacks. Then we'll have a high-level overview of how ManageEngine is just the correct option for enterprises to implement Essential 8 Maturity Level 3 without breaking a sweat. The session will end with the questions that have been posed by you guys. In case you have any queries during the session, please do not hesitate to post it on the chat window. I've got an expert panel waiting here ready to answer your question. Now, before we start off with the session, it's only my solemn duty that I talk about one other topic that's been plaguing all of us today. Now, it's not cybersecurity. I'm talking about coronavirus. So these are some of the prevention mechanisms for you to stay safe during these testing times. We all of us are in it together, and we hope we'll come out stronger out of this. So these are some of the measures that you already know, right from washing your hands to wearing a face mask, practicing social distancing, keeping distance with people that are sick, and avoiding touching of your eyes, nose, and mouth directly, staying home if you're sick, coughing into a kerchief or your elbow. So that's pretty much it. And now that we are done with the 8 controls for coronavirus, let us jump into the 8 controls for cybersecurity that has been derived by the Australian Signals Directorate. Now, what is the need for Essential 8? Now, if I ask this question to Australian Signals Directorate, the information security body behind Essential 8, they'll simply come back stating, if you implement this, I can guarantee that the attacks are going to reduce by 85%. Now, that is the answer to this question. That's it. But from the enterprise perspective, is this the right time? Because most of the organizations are already struggling with respect to remote work and a distributed workforce. But cybersecurity also needs to be focused on, because until now, the data and the devices that work on the data were within the enterprise confines. Now, with the remote or the distributed workforce, the data is outside the confines of the enterprise, which means it's outside the perimeter level security and is into the big bad world of the internet, which means that this is the optimal time for you to implement cybersecurity controls. Now, with most organizations that were not ready for remote work trying to focus on productivity with respect to remote workforce, cybersecurity almost took a backseat, and it has wreaked havoc on most enterprises. The pandemic turned out to be an external security audit that not a lot of enterprises were ready for. While this might be an adequate reason for enterprises to focus on cybersecurity, let me quickly share a few numbers with respect to cybersecurity. But before that, let us just go back a month ago. What happened in June was that a state-sponsored sophisticated cyber attack targeted all Australian government as well as all the institutions under it. It was supposed to have affected all the levels of government as well as essential services and businesses. While we were expecting the PM to come out with updates for Corona, instead, last month he had to come out and talk about this cyber attack and also urged businesses to improve their cyber defense. This was also the time when we realized that Australia was spending more than 1 billion simply on cyber security. Now, attacks on the Australian government has been on the rise. In fact, in 2019, the Australian Parliament House as well as the Bureau of Meteorology suffered cyber attacks. So, cybersecurity is only for government organizations, because this seems like a government versus government problem. So, why should other enterprises look at cybersecurity? Well, if that is the misconception you have, here's the list of Australian organizations that were affected by cyber attacks in 2019. These have famous organizations across verticals. You have got the Australian Institute of Sport, Commonwealth Bank, Bupa, and the Australian National University. So now you might be wondering as to whether cybersecurity is only for famous enterprises. And even this is also a misconception, because Carbon Black conducted a survey with a mix of organizations, and these are the numbers that I'd like to discuss with you. So in that survey, which had a mix of organizations, 97% of the organizations were supposed to have suffered one or more external cyber attacks. Now, the keyword here is external cyber attacks. So this doesn't include insider attacks. And without that, there were 97% organizations that suffered one or more cyber attacks. And next up, 70% organizations reported loss of reputation due to cyber attacks. So this is another part of collateral damage when an organization suffers cyber attacks. Not only do you lose money as ransom, lose your data, you also lose your reputation in case you fall as victim for cyber attacks. And the third point, 90% of organizations reported an increase in cyber attacks in the past year. Despite more enterprises becoming more cyber aware and trying to shore up their cyber defense, cyber crooks have been on a different level altogether. They are coming up with advanced strategies to attack organizations on a pretty frequent basis. And enterprises, to be very honest, have not been up to it. We have seen more and more surge in attack, and this is going to drastically improve as the time comes. Like, we are going to have more and more attacks. The rate of attack is going to go up even from 90% to probably 95 or 97%. And it's high time that the organizations look to become much more cyber resilient. And 62% of data breaches reported to the OAIC, that is the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, where you report such data breaches, were as a result of a cyber attack. So these were not accidental data breaches. 62% of data breaches that actually happened last year were as a part of a malicious cyber attack. And lastly, 89% of the organizations felt that the attacks were more sophisticated now. Well, yes, that is true. Yes, organizations are becoming a little bit aware, so the cyber crooks are becoming much more sophisticated. But the fact of the matter is that these hackers still use the most common attack vectors and attack surfaces. For example, unpatched operating system or unapproved applications or unmanaged endpoints. Like, these are still the most commonly used attack vectors and attack surfaces to get into an enterprise network and wreak havoc. Now, we've been talking about numbers. Now, we've been talking about percentages. Now, let me talk some more numbers, the numbers that enterprises can clearly understand. So 60 million or more is the money lost due to a business email compromise. And similarly, it's 2.1 billion. That is the estimated economic impact due to an identity crime on a yearly basis. Similarly, money lost by businesses to cybercrime has been 8 million, and money lost by consumers due to cybercrime has been 2.3 billion. Now, the most fearful part is that these are a little bit of older statistics. Some of them are 2018, some of them are 2017. And these numbers were completely mind-boggling. I was trying to guess the number, and guess what? I got all of them wrong. It is not the number. It was whether it was thousands or million or billion. I was completely shocked, and these stats boggle my mind, and hence I've put the source as well. All of these numbers have been taken from the Australian Cybersecurity Strategy 2020. And now the last stat is the one that businesses need to focus on. The average cost of a cybercrime to a business was $276,000 in 2019. Now, this is one of the clearest indicators as to why the organizations should go towards Enterprise 8, Essential 8 right now. Now, you may wonder, but during pandemic, well, aren't all the IT admins already struggling with trying to achieve productivity? I just said that they have been having problems, but why exactly during pandemic? Well, I'll tell you the answer. If there is one group that has not been affected by Corona, that is the cyber crooks, the hackers, because they've always been working remote. They've been trying to access your enterprise's data from the outside, and their productivity has not dipped due to the pandemic. In fact, it has increased during the pandemic, to be very honest. Now, I'll just show you a few examples of what I'm trying to say. So these are some of the SMS-based attacks, the phishing by texting, through SMSs or text messages. As you can see, when you look at this message right now, you can understand that this is a scam. But sometimes when it comes from a contact named GOV or MyGOV, and with the fear that has already engulfed people, there are higher chances that they are going to click on this link. Now, this is with respect to text-based phishing. What about email-based phishing? Here you go. Now, these are mails that are masquerading. It's the hackers masquerading as Australian government, and you can see in first look, this seems pretty convincing. You have got the Australian government logo, and you've got the copyright and all of this. So there are higher chances that email users feel that this is legitimate, and that has been the case because a lot of them have fallen victims to such corona-related phishing campaigns. So, with cyber attacks not stopping due to pandemic, I feel this is just the right time for enterprises to focus on cybersecurity control. I was in fact joking with my colleague that after coronavirus, I guess Essential 8 has been the phrase that has been mostly talked about in the IT circles in enterprises. Now, with the need out of the way, let us quickly jump into the brief history on Essential 8. Now, this is going to be just one slide where I cover the timeline of how Essential 8 has come into its current form. It all started in 2011, where the top 4 cybersecurity controls was devised by the Australian cybersecurity body, and it was considered to be a part of the government's protective security policy framework, or PSPF, and this was an award-winning set of cybersecurity controls. So much so that in 2014, it was made mandatory for all government agencies. And then in 2017, Essential 8 was introduced as an update over the top 4 controls. Now, right now, there are 37 cybersecurity controls according to the Australian Signals Directorate, or ASD, and 8 of them are in Essential 8, and you've got 29 other controls. Essential 8, as you may know, includes the previous top 4 security controls as well as 4 additional ones. And then in 2018, Essential 8 was included as a core part of the government's ISM, or the Information Security Manual. And in 2019, it was mandated for full implementation to ensure complete compliance with the ISM. As you can see, it was making giant strides from 17 to 18 to 19, and that is because Australian Signals Directorate has been constantly looking out for cybersecurity trends and has been updating its cybersecurity controls similarly to ensure that it is relevant as well as doesn't put a burden on the enterprise. For example, one of the major E8 controls, multi-factor authentication, was supposedly included after the famous Reddit SMS authentication attack, whereby hackers got certain SMS auth tokens and were able to compromise privileged Reddit accounts. So after identifying that, they tried to modify the multi-factor authentication cybersecurity control essentially. So we are going to look at how the Australian Signals Directorate has been constantly working on Essential 8 to ensure that only the best controls are implemented by organizations and they can achieve maximum cyber benefit out of it. Now, breakdown of Essential 8. Now, we have been discussing a little bit about Essential 8 till now. So, as you might be aware, there are 8 controls across 3 maturity levels, and it seems pretty difficult when you look at it to try and implement, because that's like 8 controls and you do not know where to start and where to end. As I said during the agenda, I'm trying to break this down into simple IT admin understandable form as to what you do and what you get. And we'll also be discussing what these 3 levels mean and what is the optimal security, optimal maturity level that enterprises need to achieve. So this is basically the ASD Essential 8. As you can see, most controls are application dependent because application is one of the most common attack vectors that are used by cyber crooks to exploit vulnerabilities and get access into the network. So we have got application whitelisting, patching of applications, and application hardening. So these are some of the controls that you might be already aware of and you might have implemented. Similarly, we have got something to do with configuring macros. As you know, it's the visual basic programming snippet that is used to repeat instructions and execute small pieces of code, that is macros. So we have got an option for securing macros. And then we come to user management, where you can restrict admin privileges, like you ensure that only the right amount of privilege is given to each and every user. And with respect to user management, we've also got multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication, I guess most of you must be aware, and it's becoming commonplace in IT enterprises. And the last one is daily backup. Now, this is something that most enterprises are already doing, whether it's a part of Essential 8 or not. Now, as I already stated, most of you will be aware of all of this, but since we are dealing with Essential 8, I'm going to quickly explain each one of these briefly. But before that, I've been already telling you how ASD has been looking to comprehensively update the Essential 8 to ensure that it is of maximum benefit to enterprises. Now, they've already split the Essential 8 controls into 3 different categories, and you can choose categories based on what you want to restrict. Ideally, you want to restrict malware from being injected and executed. The strategies that you need to follow are application whitelisting, application patching, configuring MS Office macros, and user application hardening. Now, in case you want to limit the extent of cybersecurity incidents, like you want to reduce the impact of such incidents, option is to restrict administrator privileges, OS patching, and multi-factor authentication. Lastly, in case you want to recover from such an attack, the obvious option is daily backup. So we are going to see all of this at a high level in today's training session and in greater detail during next week's training session as to how ManageEngine can help you implement all of this. Now let us get back to the task at hand, which is explaining the Essential 8. Now first up, we'll deal with application whitelisting. So as you might be aware, application whitelisting ensures that the enterprise decides what are the applications that are to be installed on the workstation, as well as what are the applications that are to be accessing corporate data. Now, what this does is that it ensures that only a certain set of predefined applications can be installed on the machines, implicitly blacklisting the rest of the applications. Now, this is pretty similar to a firewall setup. In case of a firewall, what you will do, you will decide that these are the connections and I want, and these are the connections that I don't. So it's more of an yes or no. Like I want yes to these applications, the ones that are enterprise approved, and no to other applications. Of course, there exists this gray area called as gray list, where you get certain applications, and it is for the IT administrator to decide as to whether the applications in the gray list fall either under the whitelist or the blacklist. But from the outside, application whitelisting is one of the basic controls that can help you minimize cyber attacks, because only when you try and install an unapproved application do you open up chances for the bad actors to gain access into your network. Without that, their chances are greatly minimized. Now, one other side effect of application whitelisting is that it gives the IT administrator complete visibility on the applications that are running on the network, because obviously this has already been predefined by the IT admin. Now, once that is done, this completely restricts the option of shadow IT, whereby employees try to install other applications without the permission of the IT admin. Now, there's going to be no case of such an instance, because you cannot even install, let alone use, an application that has not been approved by the enterprise. Now, this is application whitelisting. Next up, application patching. So we have been talking about application installation in the previous slide, and application patching in layman terms is essentially updating. So when you patch an application, it fixes known vulnerabilities in applications, minimizing chances of unauthorized entry for the malicious actors. Now, a lot of famous cybersecurity attacks like WannaCry and Petya were because the applications were unpatched despite the patches being available. Now, Essential 8 mandates that extremely risky patches, like these patches that are most necessary to ensure that there are no cyber attacks, such patches are termed extreme risk patches, and high risk users, these are the users that are whose machines are exposed to the outside world of the internet. So these high risk machines should have this extreme risk patches applied within 48 hours, or like 2 days. That is one of the controls within Essential 8. Now, one other benefit of application patching is that it ensures that all the applications are running the newest version with all the advanced features. Next up, configuring macros. Now, similar to application whitelisting, this option is mostly macros whitelisting, whereby you can either choose to completely disable macros, or you check and approve macros that are to run on the enterprise network. So you decide what are the macros that run, and this is essentially whitelisting of macros, whereby all the other macros are restricted. Now, macros related attacks are one of the oldest method of cyber attacks and was pretty common before, but now, as I said, bad actors have become much more advanced and are using sophisticated methods like you're exploiting exploits due to unpatched applications or unpatched OS. But still, since this is currently not being used, there are chances that this might be ignored, and this is the reason why ASD has included it as a part of your Essential 8. So sometimes you end up trying to patch your applications and OS, but and other times you might end up missing on macros, and this might cause problems. Why? Because mostly malicious macros can easily evade basic email filtering or application control mechanisms. With that being the case, no matter you patch your applications or patch your OS, if you leave your macros out, that might be a problem. Next up, application hardening. So we are back to applications now. So we have spoken about application installation and application patching. Now we are going to talk about how to harden this application to make it much more difficult for a malicious actor to leverage. So for example, the basic set is that you restrict web browsers from utilizing Flash or Java or ads. Now these are some of the common methodologies used by hackers to get into your network. For example, we see random advertisements, you click on that and suddenly some application gets installed and boom, your machine gets infected. And similarly, essentially it mandates that you harden all the commonly used applications, for example, MS Office or the Adobe suite of applications, for example, Bluekeep as well as WannaCry. So these are some of the common cyber attacks that happen because of vulnerabilities in Adobe as well as MS Office applications. And similar to application whitelisting, it's a continuous process. So at one point of time, an application A might be commonly used, so you harden that, and later there are more applications that become much more commonly used, and that point of time you'll have to harden these applications. So it's going to be a constant and a continuous process, similar to application whitelisting. Once we are done with application hardening, next one is user management hardening, whereby you grant adequate privileges only to the employees only based on the job they are undertaking. For example, I'm going to grant permission to employees to access a certain confidential data only if they are going to work on that confidential data. Otherwise, granting them privilege is going to be a problem. Right now, most enterprises have begun to embrace zero trust setup, whereby I do not trust any employee at the start, and each and every time they request for a privilege, it is validated before it's being granted to the employee. In case of non-regular employees, say contract employees, or for example, you get an external agency to audit your enterprise data, in such scenarios, it's ideal that you grant them temporary access. Now, we spoke about patching applications. Now it's patching operating systems. So similar to application patching, OS patching ensures that all the vulnerabilities in your OS gets fixed. And similar to application patching, even here, extreme risk vulnerabilities are to be patched within 48 hours in case of high risk users, that is the employees whose machines are facing the internet. Now, one other side advantage with patching operating systems is that OS patching ensures that all the machines run on a single and latest OS version, making it easier to manage. So for example, you are having a custom enterprise application. So you have updated this and now you need to test. In such a case, you need to test this on only say 1 or 2 versions of your OS, because all of them have been patched and are running the latest version. So max, it's going to be 1 or 2 versions of the OS. So it makes it easier to manage and maintain in case of custom applications as well. And multi-factor authentication. Now, this is yet another cybersecurity control that's being implemented across all enterprises. So this, as you know, adds an additional layer of authentication before I can get to access confidential data. Now, one other advantage with multi-factor authentication is that it renders certain cyber attacks redundant. For example, In case I gain access to your credentials via key logging or brute force, there's nothing that I can do. Even if I've guessed the password correctly and I try to log in to access some corporate resource, there is nothing that I can do, because there's going to be another level of authentication. You are going to have biometric authentication probably before you can access the data. Thus, it renders old methods like key logging and keystroke logging and brute force useless. So that is one other advantage with multi-factor authentication, and it's one of the reasons why more and more enterprises are embracing it, especially with all of them going towards cloud. Now, daily backups. In addition to it being a security option, it is also a fail-safe one. It ensures that you have got copy of the corporate data to be utilized in case you fall victim to a cyber attack. Essentially, it recommends that you have it stored for 3 months in a non-editable format. That is, it cannot be rewritten or it cannot be erased, and ideally it's stored in an offsite location. And it also minimizes the bargaining hand for attackers. So assume someone encrypts your data and demands for ransom. Usually it's not going to be one single demand, it's going to be multiple sets of demand, and ultimately sometimes you're not even given the decryption key. The data that was encrypted remains encrypted. A lot of enterprises have fallen victims to that. Now assume you do backups daily, someone comes and encrypts your data. You can be like, okay, you keep the encrypted version, I'm going to just clean this machine, I'm going to use my daily backup and I'm going to start again, and this time I'm going to ensure that there's no chance of ransomware attack. So that way, it's another advantage of daily backups, that it reduces chances of enterprises falling victims to ransomware attacks. Now, with the 8 controls out of the way, these are the maturity levels. So this is how it all started in 2017. There were 5 different levels from 0 to 4, and maturity level 0 was actually nothing. It was just an audit one. It was just an audit methodology. You just make a note of the applications that are running. You make a note of the patches that are running. So that wasn't actually a maturity level. It wasn't a level at all. So ASD understood that and decided that I am going to tell you what is the optimal maturity level. And this is the conclusion that they came with. There are 5 levels. You need not be worried about level 0, because that means that you're not aligned with any cybersecurity control. And level 4 is for like high risk environment, like the government institutions. Like maturity level 3 is the optimal option for all enterprises, for most of the enterprises. 95% of the enterprises, if they are able to reach Essential 8 maturity level 3, they are fully aligned with the mitigation strategies according to ASD. Now, with that out of the way, let us quickly discuss on the maturity levels. Like as I said before, we have ignored 4, we have ignored level 0, and this is maturity level 1, 2, and 3. Now, I know this is going to be difficult to read, and it's going to be difficult to understand, and even more difficult to implement. What I'm going to do is I'm going to condense and compress this. I'm going to let you know what ASD recommends in case of maturity level 3. You see so many instructions, but I have just condensed them into a pretty simple format. Now, in case of application whitelisting, maturity level 3 mandates that not only your workstations, but your servers can only install and execute applications, software libraries, scripts, and installers that have been approved by the enterprise. Only after it has been vetted by the enterprise can it run on the computers. Also, it recommends that you adhere to Microsoft's latest block rules. So this is maturity level 3 with respect to application whitelisting. Next up, patching of applications. In case of extreme risk vulnerabilities, I already stated what extreme risk vulnerabilities are. These need to be patched automatically within 48 hours. And you also need to ensure that the version of the application running on the machines are vendor supported. Obviously, if you keep updating your applications and ensure that they are running the latest version, it will be supported by the vendor. So that is what the maturity level 3 mandates. Next up, Microsoft Office macros. As I already stated, this is pretty similar to application whitelisting. So what you do is you configure macro settings to ensure that only those macros that are approved by the enterprise can run on the machine, and most importantly, these settings cannot be modified by the machine user. And similarly, it also restricts usage of macros that have been downloaded directly from the internet. Next up is user application hardening. So this is to ensure that the browsers do not run Flash or Java or ads, and similarly, MS Office is required to disable Flash content and OLE packages. So this is the maturity level 3 when it comes to user application hardening. They want both browsers and MS Office to have restricted functionalities. Let us just continue with maturity level 3, administrator privileges. In case of administrative privileges, the first request for privilege to access, be it information or systems or applications, is verified thoroughly and it gets revalidated regularly. For example, an employee might need to access sensitive data only for some period of time when he's working on task A. So once the task A is completed, you revalidate and then you understand, okay, this employee does not require this privilege to continue accessing the sensitive data, so I'm going to remove this. And similarly, privileged users or users of trust that handle extremely sensitive data in an enterprise, they are supposed to be restricted permissions to access common activity, to perform common activities like accessing your mail, downloading files, or even browsing the internet. So why such restrictions? Because these are some of the most common methods by which you can, by mistake, download some files that is the source for malware to get injected on the machine and ultimately to the network. So in case an employee is handling or dealing with extremely sensitive data, essentially at maturity level 3 restricts the permissions to access the mail and general browse the internet. Next up, patching operating systems. So this is, as I explained before, similar to application patching. So in case of extreme risk vulnerabilities, you are expected to automatically patch the OS within 48 hours and also ensure that the version running on the machine, so this can be workstations, servers, ICT equipment, all of this needs to be vendor supported. Now the penalty made essentially control multi-factor authentication. It basically, according to level 3, wants almost all the users in the enterprise to have multi-factor authentication implemented. For example, all users that are requesting remote access will need to be authenticated by MFA. And similarly, users accessing corporate data like sensitive data as well as privileged users by default need to have MFA implemented. Right now, with the remote workforce, most of the users are trying to access confidential data via VPN. So in such cases, it's ideal that you have an MFA implemented, thereby adding an additional layer of security. So MFA is going to be much more relevant with the remote workforce right now. And similarly, they have also recommended they have strong passwords as well as biometric authentication to ensure that these are less easily guessable. The last one is daily backup. So as already stated before, all the confidential data needs to be backed up in a non-rewritable and non-erasable format, and at least 3 months or more worth backup should be stored. And while we all hope and pray that there doesn't come a situation where we need to utilize these backups post a cybersecurity incident, the Essential 8 maturity level 3 states that you test full restoration once every year, and in case of partial restoration, you need to do it much more frequently. So that is all. Like, these 2 slides are what ASD mandates in Essential 8 maturity level 3. Now this seems much more achievable, right? Let us come to the next topic, which is essentials of Essential 8. Now you must be wondering, like, why am I trying to confuse you? Isn't Essential 8 already essential? So what do I mean by stating essentials in Essential 8? Now, I've already been vouching about how ASD has been helping enterprises by coming up with Essential 8 and by also not mandating. So by not making it mandatory and just making a recommendation, what Essential 8 has done is that it gives enterprises an option to implement it by cycles. So for example, I can choose and decide, like, out of these 8 controls, controls 1, 2, and 3 are the most important for me, and I need to implement it right away, whether it's pandemic or not, whether it's a remote workforce or not. I need to implement this right away to ensure that my employees do not fall victims to such cyber attacks. So you can choose and decide, since it's not mandatory. Now I'm going to help you by recommending among these 8 controls, what are the ones that you need to pick and implement immediately. Now, we already discussed about the old top 4 controls, the one that was devised in 2011 when we were discussing the history of Essential 8. Now, these top 4 controls, OS patching, application whitelisting, and managing admin privileges, these are the 4 controls that you need to implement. These are what I would say are essentials among the 8 cybersecurity controls, and these need to be implemented no matter what. So this would be my first cycle of trying to implement Essential 8. Next up, I would want user application hardening as well as configuring Microsoft Office macros. Now you must be wondering, just wait a minute, didn't you say Microsoft Office macros is not being regularly used? So why would you want that to be done next after I've implemented top 4 security controls? That is precisely because the other 2 controls, multi-factor authentication and daily backups, are going to be implemented no matter what. It need not necessarily be implemented as a part of Essential 8, but it's going to be implemented because more and more organizations are moving towards cloud, which means multi-factor authentication is going to become more of a necessity than a nice to have. And similarly, with cloud coming in, daily backups are going to be automated by the cloud provider themselves, and the enterprises need not bother with it. So these 2 controls, I genuinely believe, will be automatically implemented. So what we have got right now is, in the first set, we are going to implement the top 4 controls, and the next set, we are going to deal with user application hardening and Microsoft Office macros. Now, how does ManageEngine help? So at the start of the session, I had spoken to you about how we'll have special emphasis on endpoint and application control. So this is a series of webinars. So first up, we'll be dealing with endpoint and application, and later we'll see what are the other Essential 8 controls and how ManageEngine will help you with it. But to give you an overview, ManageEngine has got the right solution for each and every Essential 8 control when it comes to multi-factor authentication, restricting admin privilege, as well as network equipment patching, as well as daily backups. You have got AD 360, Active Directory 360, Privileged Access Management 360, Network Configuration Manager, and Recovery Manager Plus that can help you with it. In case of AD 360 and Privileged Access Management 360, these are a suite of applications that help you with configuring multi-factor authentication, helps you with restricting admin privileges, and similarly, Network Configuration Manager, as you can understand from the name, helps you with patching your network equipment, helps you with backups. Recovery Manager Plus is pretty much similar. It helps you recover your data in case of cybersecurity incidents. So we will be touching upon all of these in the next session, but what we are going to deal with are the other cybersecurity controls. So we are not going to extensively deal with daily backups or with network equipment patching, but what we are going to deal with is application whitelisting, patching, user hardening, OS level patching, and configuring macros. We are going to deal with all the other controls. Now, when it comes to application hardening, ManageEngine has a solution whereby you can choose to whitelist applications based on the vendor, based on the product name, based on the verified executable, that is the EXE that you need to initiate for the installation. You can also go much more granular. You can have whitelisting by file hash or folder or by folder path. So you can go granular as well to ensure that only this file, when it comes to using file hashing, you can ensure that only one particular type of file can be used to install these applications. So I select verified executable, then I select the application, say I select delivery service exe and 40 settings.exe. I just whitelist this application and implement a policy. When I do this, Any other application cannot be installed. Now, in case I want my organizations to be completely Google free, I'll select vendor and select Google, which will ensure that no Google application gets installed on the workstations in my enterprise. So this is a high-level overview on application whitelisting. We'll be seeing proper use cases in the next session. Now, next up, patching OS and applications. So as you can see, we have got the right solution that can help you patch your Mac machines, your Linux machines, as well as Windows. So what I do is I'll select the patch from here, and then I'll have the deployment completely automated. So I'll tell ManageEngine software to have this application patched at a particular time. So I'll want it to ideally happen during non-work hours. And even in case the machine is switched off, I can ensure that it gets switched on automatically, the patch gets applied, and then it gets shut down. So I can completely automate and schedule deployment of patches. And what else can I do? I can also test and approve these patches. So I first create a test bed with the different OS versions, have the application run on this test bed, have the patch updated on this test bed, see if the application runs fine, and then have it automatically deployed on the other machines. So it provides you a complete solution when it comes to patching. Now, with respect to user application hardening, we spoke about trying to restrict add-ons and trying to restrict Adobe Flash. So we have got the right options across 4 of the most commonly used browsers in enterprise: Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Edge, as well as Internet Explorer. You must be wondering, are people still using Internet Explorer? Now, you wouldn't believe a lot of web apps actually run only on Internet Explorer or run the best on Internet Explorer. So there are enterprises that strictly require the applications to run on Internet Explorer. So we have understood that need, and we have got add-on management for Internet Explorer as well. So we can simply restrict Flash, ads, as well as restrict users from installing any other kind of extensions. So we've also got a Java manager, which helps you restrict Java from running on the browser. And we've got a lot more other features like threat prevention, data loss prevention, which will be discussed in greater detail during the next session. Now, in case you're curious and want to immediately know what are the capabilities, we can actually arrange for a free demo. In case that would interest you, please comment on chat and we can arrange for a personalized free demo of any product of your choice. Now, continuing with the Essential 8 controls. Now, we have got configuring Microsoft macros, restricting admin privileges. So we've got all of these Essential 8 controls, and with ManageEngine solution, we have got something called as configuration, which is the Swiss Army knife. As you can see, these are all the capabilities that can be completely configured and worked upon. I can configure MS Office, I can configure the user management. All of this can be done right from here. So once again, I'm just giving you a sneak peek into what is there next week. We'll be discussing all the Essential 8 use cases and how it can be achieved using ManageEngine solutions. Now that brings me to the end of the session. So I've been talking about how ManageEngine solution can help you with application whitelisting and patching. So what is the name of the solution? Now, first up, I'm gonna introduce you to ManageEngine Desktop Central, our flagship endpoint management product that helps you achieve Essential 8 completely, or at least 6 of the 8 controls completely. Like, it lets you manage endpoints like workstations, servers, browsers, mobile devices like smartphones and tablets across multiple OS versions like Mac, Windows, and Linux. So this is the flagship product that helps in managing your endpoints end to end. Now, in case you're looking for a management solution just for your mobile devices like smartphones, tablets, and probably laptops, we have got the right solution for you, Mobile Device Manager Plus, that helps you manage only the mobile devices. Now, in case you've already got an endpoint management solution, or you're not ready to get into endpoint management, but you look at just patching the application, as you can see, OS patching and application patching are some of the most common requirements in not only Essential 8, but in cybersecurity controls that has been devised by other countries, like even the US requires you to constantly patch your applications as well as the OS. So in case you're looking for dedicated patching solutions, we have got Patch Manager Plus, or comprehensive patch management solution available across Mac, Linux, and Windows that lets you patch applications. Or if you're looking for something beyond patch management, like you want an integrated vulnerability identification solution that can also come with mitigation, we have got Vulnerability Manager Plus. So what it does is that it identifies vulnerabilities, provides you with a workaround for zero-day vulnerabilities, and also ensures that all of these vulnerabilities get mitigated. So in case you're looking for something beyond just patch management, Vulnerability Manager Plus will be your option. Now, maybe you are already using SCCM for your Microsoft patching, but you're looking for a solution that helps with third-party patching. Well, we have got a solution for that as well, is Patch Connect Plus. So Patch Connect Plus is an add-on to SCCM that helps you with third-party patching. Now, in case you've already got a solution for endpoint management, a solution for patching as well, and you're just looking for solutions that can help you with just this application management or just browser management, we have got individual solutions for that as well. Application Control Plus deals with the application whitelisting and granting privileges for using this application. And Browser Security Plus, as the name suggests, completely deals with browser management. So you must be wondering, so why do we have so many products when Desktop Central can do all of these capabilities? The objective here is to try and help SMBs. For example, if they've got just one particular need that they want to fulfill at this point of time, we have got point products that just deal with it. For example, your organization has been extensively moving to cloud and you just want to secure your browsers. So you can probably opt for just browser security right now. And in case you're looking for a wholesome, complete endpoint management solution, we have got Desktop Central. So that is the actual idea behind having multiple products for multiple needs. We want to cater to both SMBs as well as large enterprises. Now that brings me to the end of my training session. Now the floor is open for questions. If you've got any questions, post it on chat and I'll be happy to help you. And I've got my team ready to answer your questions as well. And in case you're interested in demo, like I have given you so many products right now, and you must be curious as to what each and every product actually does. What are their capabilities? So in case you're interested in that, we can have a free personalized demo at a date and time of your convenience. If that interests you, just put it on chat and we'll have a demo scheduled. Okay, so now we have got a question. So they want to know if we offer any kind of a free trial option for all our products. So we have got a fully functional 30-day trial where you can use all of the product's capabilities and decide whether this is just the right application for you or not. This includes right from managing Desktop Central to Browser Security Plus. We have all these products have a 30-day free trial and that is fully functional. Now we've got another question. Okay. So yes, ManageEngine Desktop Central comes with all of these capabilities. Like it helps you with, it comes by default with patch management as well as the configurations that I explained last. Whereas browser security and application control are optional add-ons. So in case you do not want to focus on user application hardening or browser management and you just want to focus on patching as well as user management, you can just opt for Desktop Central without the add-ons. So I see some more questions have been pouring in and we'll be happy to answer your question once the session is done as well. So that brings my session to an end. In case you enjoyed it and you found it informative, please share your feedback on the survey that comes once you close this session, and be sure to log in next week for you to understand how ManageEngine can help you with Essential 8. We are going to discuss all the use cases with respect to Essential 8 level 3, and we are also going to show you real time how ManageEngine helps you with Essential 8.